tell you my truth, little one? How can I tell you the things I have done? Though I cannot see the sky, you know, I only think of you. And you shine for me more brightly than the sun. And how can I tell you the tears I have shed? Are you still lonely each night in your bed? I could tell you to forget me, but the words would not be true. And I love you always, even if you do. I am weakness, I am mother. We are part of one another. I am stronger and more hopeful than it seems. And my story is your story that I sent you from a prison with 1,000 tender kisses for your dreams. For the mothers and the daughters and the children, I am strong. I am weakness, I am mother. We are born of one another. I am stronger and more hopeful than it seems. And my story is your story that I sent you from my prison with 1,000 tender kisses for your dreams. This is my story with love, Nazarene.
Good afternoon and welcome back to My Harlem Portrait, the show that wants to shed a light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans in the building of this country. This is a very special edition though, because I'm gonna dedicate all this month to film and film producing and actors, since we have Tribeca in town. And today we are gonna start with a couple, actually, they are a couple who are presenting the film NASRIN. We are talking about the writer, producer, and director, Jeff Kaufman, welcome, and the producer, Marcia S. Ross. They are presenting this wonderful, extraordinary documentary called NASRIN, which I decided to present in my Harlem Portrait because I have a special connection with it, but I will tell you later why. Welcome to my Harlem Portraits.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's really nice to be here.
I want, first of all, to congratulate you on this work, which is really exceptional. And it struck me right from the very first shot, which says 530 BC Persia. Women have the legal right to own property, manage their finances, receive an education, and choose their spouse. And then in a few frames, you accurately punctuated 2,500 years of history of the ups and downs and the final decline of women's rights in this country and human rights in this country. So I found this absolutely brilliant. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with who is NASRIN and what compelled you to make this film? Because I think you felt compelled to make it.
We're compelled. We were. But actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to segue back to something because I love that this is my Harlem portrait.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this whole movement in this country and other countries too that they want to have barriers up, and they think, oh, our culture is perfect, and don't let any other culture step on us. But actually, the world grows, cultures grow, countries grow by connecting and learning from each other. And so, an earlier film that we did, and actually a film that helped introduce us in some ways, was based in Harlem. It was about the Savoy Ballroom in Harlem and Chick Webb. Wow. And Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington, and how swing dance and swing music that came out of Harlem, that came out of the Savoy Ballroom was the first place in America where whites and blacks could meet each other on the dance floor and dance together. That was revolutionary. And so, you know, that film was called The Savoy King. You can find out more about it on our website. You know, I have my heart is in many ways still there. Harlem is an example of a community lifting the world. And we wanted to capture some of that with NASRIN. And so when we first reached out to NASRIN, who is this incredible human rights activist in Iran, she's represented women and religious minorities and children and people, journalists and artists and people on death row with great courage. You know,
she's a lawyer, right?
What's that?
She's a lawyer.
She's a lawyer. When Marcia and I first reached out to her, we both shared this feeling like through her, we could capture a community of effort, not unlike the community that came out of the Savoy. So that was one of our goals, not just to tell NASRIN's story in a personal way, but really have it a conduit to tell this larger story about women's rights activists over the years, and really what life is truly like in Iran, not the stereotype we're so often given.
Marcia, what do you think about that? Being a woman, what struck you most while doing this documentary about their situation now?
A couple things. The first thing was the lack of rights, and you know, how easily your rights could be taken from you, and how important it is to fight for your rights, because there's a lot of pressure in this country and in a lot of countries around the world, you know, to take away people's rights, particularly women's rights, you know, sadly by men, you know, and by the government. And it really kind of, it's like a wake-up call to constantly remember, you know, to not be cavalier, to not take for granted our rights that we have. It's the United States, the women, as much as we're going through a lot right now, we do have a lot of rights that women in Iran don't have, but we have to protect them and not take them for granted. That was one thing. The other thing, of course, was getting to know NASRIN and other human rights activists that have ended up in prison, who are, you know, are mothers and, you know, daughters and wives, and have made these choices to, you know, to take action, you know, for the future of Iran and the people of Iran, that will ultimately led to them being in prison and being separated from their families. And I really wanted to understand that. But these women have tremendous purpose and tremendous belief. NASRIN has such great purpose in what she's trying to accomplish for her children and future generations, you know, of people, women, others in Iran. And it's a driving force. So it's not that people go, oh, the sacrifice, but it's not seen as that. You know, it's seen as, no, we have to make this difference. If we don't make this difference, who will? When will it happen? We have a moral obligation, and it's a driving force for people.
And what you're saying, I think, comes out from the letter to her daughter that you underline in the movie. Can you tell me something about this letter? Because it's really fantastic what she says.
Well, NASRIN is obviously in prison now. She was arrested in June 2018. We're approaching the 3rd-year anniversary. This Sunday is the 3rd-year anniversary of her most recent incarceration. But she was earlier held in prison from 2010 to 2013 when her children were very young. And she wrote a series of letters to her son and her daughter that are just heartbreaking and beautiful and very poetic. And we're blessed that the great actress Olivia Colman narrates the film and takes us into parts of Nasrin and others. And in it, she reads a letter that Nasrin wrote to her daughter explaining why she's doing this work. And you have to see it to experience it. But basically, she's, she feels the horrible separation. And she says that, for her husband and herself, their biggest worry about being human rights activists is the impact on their children. And I can say now, 10 years later, almost 10 years later, that both kids are more grown up and just remarkable young people and love and adore what both their parents are doing. And also, just to say, as far as letters are concerned, the great composers Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty, who wrote Ragtime and Anastasia, Once on This Island, they wrote an end song for Nasrin that's sung by Angelique Kidjo. And Lynn Ahrens' lyrics are inspired also by Nasrin's letters to her children, again saying, why am I a human rights activist? I have to do something for you. I have to do something for other children as well.
Fantastic. I'm sorry about these sirens, but I'm on the 12th floor and you can still hear it. That's New York for you. we are
remember.
Live from New York. You started to work on this documentary around the same time that the former inhabitant of the White House proposed a Muslim ban, travel ban, May 2016. How were you able to film it? Who helped you in Iran? How did you go about doing that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, the idea of doing this film had been bubbling for quite some time. And actually, the anti-Muslim, anti-Iran, anti-Islam rhetoric in this country had been percolating in very ugly ways for some time as well. And the two wove themselves together. We wanted to push back against that demonization. But then it was interesting that once we actually started, tragically, it was the era of, as you said, the former occupant whose name shall not be used. And we saw this horrendous pushback of rights against democracy, against women, against immigrants, in every single way, voting rights happening in this country. And so here we're doing a portrait of people in Iran who were fighting for democracy and fighting for their rights and putting themselves at risk. We're also seeing a lot of apathy and complacency in our country. And the two were just chilling together. We couldn't go to Iran because of previous films we've done about Iran. So, but even if we could, it wouldn't have made sense to show up with a big crew. We worked with some really courageous, wonderful filmmakers who were able to shadow Nasrin and put themselves at risk to capture really unprecedented access to real life.
The courthouse also, I was very surprised that you managed to do that. The court hearing. So they did it secretly, right? They were
the court hearing, we found footage I don't think anyone's ever seen before from Revolutionary Court in Tehran, where Nasrin is actually defending Nobel Peace Prize laureate Shirin Ebadi. That wasn't from one of our filmmakers, but that was from a source that disappeared soon thereafter. We're just glad to have that kind of access. You've never seen it before. It's amazing. And she's so tough. I mean, you've seen that scene.
Amazing.
There's this horrible prosecutor.
Is this real or this is they set it up? Because I couldn't believe that you managed to go into the court and do that. So these people who have been filming for you and so on, they have been risking their life to do this in secret. And that's why their names are not mentioned in the movie, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we wanted to protect everybody. I have to say also, that ultimately, because we couldn't go and we did film this way, we were able to capture something, I think, a lot more intimate than had we been there, obviously, with the film crew, that was just so close into every aspect of her life. And we were very concerned about the safety and well-being of every single person involved in this film. I think for us, that was the number one thing, every step of the way, from the time we began to speak about making this film and speaking to Nasrin and Reza, about their personal safety. And if anything about making this film could be worse, could make a situation worse for them. And throughout the entire making of the film, every time we spoke to them, we asked again, are you sure? Are you sure? And even last year, when we were just about to launch the film publicly and really finally show it to the public, because that's another thing, you know, when you make an independent film, particularly a documentary, raising money is very difficult. And we didn't do crowdsourcing. We kept it really under the radar because we didn't want anyone to know about the film until the very last minute that was going to be public. But even then we asked them, are you sure? We're about to, this is going to come out now. And they were, you know, they were fine. They said, yes, please, you know, they were ready to go forward. But we also got releases from every single person who was involved in the film, you know, because we have worried about it, but so far everything's been okay. And they sign releases, and you know, they're huge supporters of NASRIN, and I believe that they got involved because they really believe in her and what she is doing.
Yeah, she has been an amazing advocate, and I have a personal connection to this film and NASRIN because in 2012, the European Parliament bestowed NASRIN and Jafar Panami, the filmmaker who is also in your documentary, the Sakharov Prize. They won ex aequo. And the Sakharov Prize is the highest recognition that the European Parliament gives to people who have distinguished themselves for fighting for human rights. And they gave it to NASRIN, but she wasn't there because she was in prison. So the person who came to get the prize and speak to the European Parliament was a friend and Nobel Prize, Peace Prize laureate, Shirin Ebadi, who's also in your movie. And she accepted the prize and spoke. I was in that chamber at that time because I worked all my life for the Parliament and I left in 2013. So that was my last year. And I can still recall the emotion that the whole chamber felt and the standing ovation that these two people received when the prize was bestowed. So when I saw the name NASRIN, I said, I need to do this interview.
That's an amazing connection. That's so intense.
Yes, it's fantastic. So let's talk about, you talked about Reza. Let's tell our viewer who is Reza. Reza is her husband.
Yes.
A reporter.
Reza is her husband. He's a graphic artist, but an illustrator, but he's also, you know, a human rights activist in his own right. They are partners in everything. They support each other in their work. I mean, you know, I have my personal little nickname for Reza, and I call him our Marty Ginsburg, who is, you know, the husband of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because, you know, he stood with her and encouraged her to be the most successful version of herself she could be, you know, without it being really a threat to his own masculinity. And I think that's who Reza is. And I also think Jeff often talks about this too. It was really important for us to show that, yeah, it's a very repressive regime and the way that women are treated by men, but there are a lot of men in Iran, like Reza and some of the other men in our film, you know, who completely support their wives and don't, you know, adhere to all these old traditional rules. And he's a great example of that. And he's been a great partner to us, you know, with NASRIN in prison. You know, he's been taking care of the kids, and he's out on bail himself. He was arrested himself because of some of these things, but he's been home. And he's been great. He's been wonderful, and a wonderful friend and supporter to us as well.
In fact, that's one of the things that I noticed in this movie is how many of these men you interviewed are supporting their women, their wives, who are in the forefront of the fight. And it really dismisses this idea that we have that Eastern men are so backward and putting their women down. I mean, of course they are, but we are talking about special ones here. So I think this is very refreshing to see that these women have got the backing of so many people and so many men, because the fight is important. Women fight cannot be done without the men, because the men have the power in their hands.
You know, I think that obviously pushes back against a big stereotype, but it says something else too, which is that someone might say, oh, I'm from a certain culture, therefore I'm going to behave this way. I'm going to be some macho jerk.
Yeah.
But Reza puts the lie to that. He's from that same culture, and he sees the value in all of us and the equality of all of us. And I think that if Reza can do that in Iran and many other people like him, and by the way, there are people like Reza in every Islamic country and every Christian country and Buddhist country, then we can do the same thing here.
Yes.
And I think one of the fundamental things is that we talk about, sometimes we talk about women's rights or we talk about human rights, but you just have to realize that there's no separation. And of course, something that Marcia has talked about, and others who we've spoken to, regimes can sometimes pretend to empower men over women as a device that is actually controlling the men as well.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about this centralized power manipulating people against each other to keep itself at the center of things. And we need to realize that we have choice, and we can determine how we act ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think we went very near to that during the past 4 years.
It's not over now.
No, but at least that guy is over for the moment. I don't.
Yes.
Anyway, let's not talk about that because. So tell me, please, about the 40 days of hunger strike that she went through in 2010 and her final freedom in 2013. Tell us a little bit about that. And also in 2018, there was a young woman, Marcias, who took off her hijab in public. And in the midst of filming, while you were filming, NASRIN was arrested. Why was she arrested? And what was the whole point about taking the scarf off in public?
Well, in 2018, there became a movement called the Girls of Revolution Street, Egelop Street, actually, but Revolution Street. And the women were going out into the streets and they were taking off their hijabs in public and waving them on sticks to protest the mandatory hijab law.
Yes.
And so NASRIN took on these cases defending these women because they were being arrested for doing this against the law. And she was taking on these cases, and she took on Nargis Husseini's case. That was one of them. And that was actually one of the main reasons she was arrested was, on trumped up charges. She was just defending the rights of this young woman, but they put her in prison, for 38 years, for basically defending this woman's right to take off her hijab in public. And, I think what happens is NASRIN has this wonderful line in the film where she says, this piece of cloth, what it represents, it's not enough for us to be able to take off our hijabs, and they say, okay, sure, well, you can take it off. No, we need, the right is that we make that decision, that we can wear it or not wear it, but it's we that decide, we women decide that we want to do this. It's not the men that are telling us. And that's really was a point of hers.
Yeah, that was fundamental. And you said that she was sentenced, this is recently in 2019, right? To, tell us, 38 years?
Years, yeah, and 100 and, what is it, 70?
38 year, it's a cumulative sentence.
Mhm.
That, by the way, was passed on in secret, and she was never told the full charges, there was never provided any evidence, but this is the way it typically is in Iran. And so the cumulative sentence was 38 years in prison and 148 lashes. In practicality, that may go down to 12 years or so because they have a cumulative sentencing law, but we're still talking about decades in prison for a woman who was just defending
Their job.
rights that we take for granted here.
And she's now served 3 years. I mean, Monday is the third, is the Sunday. The 13th of June is the 3rd year of her imprisonment. She's gotten a couple of furloughs for health purposes, but, she's still there, and we're advocating all of the time for her release.
Yeah, let me just note that she was transferred from Evin prison to this place called Garchak prison, which is a notoriously unsanitary prison.
Oh,
Soon thereafter, she got COVID. She also has a heart condition. She's in a crowded cell with no windows and no ventilation, and the constant smell of sewage and water that's full of salt. And it's just as unhealthy as possible. But people can find out more about NASRIN, find out how to watch the film internationally and nationally, and be part of the newsletter and get involved in the effort on behalf of her and others by going to www.nasrinfilm.com. It's our website. You know, we're in constant touch with people in Iran, and we're constantly trying to make sure that this is not just a film, but it's really a movement. And, you know, going back to that first time we talked to NASRIN, she said, well, I could do this, but I don't want it to be just about me. I want it to be about others as well. That says everything you need to know about who she is. And the campaign is also about human rights activists everywhere.
The film is going to launch on Tuesday on Hulu here in the United States. There are places that have Hulu, and as Jeff mentioned on our NASRIN Film website, for those who don't have Hulu, we have a link. It's, you know, it's on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on Google Play. It's on iTunes. And it's available in countries pretty much all over the planet. It's even been seen in Iran, and it's still running in virtual cinema as well in theaters. So there's lots of ways to see the film, and we really want people after they see the film to get involved and take action as well.
Yes, please, because this film, that's why I'm showing it, and I'm having this interview because I know that the viewers of my Harlem Portraits are people who are really interested, and they're really fighters for human rights. And this is a movie that is fundamental. And that sentence of 38 years and 148 lashes, which is crazy, sparked protests all over the world for her to be freed and freed from prison. So this movement for NASRIN is really something that is all over the globe. And thank you for having sparked that with this movie, because it's absolutely amazing. One last word about what is the best memory you have of making this movie, the happiest moment during the film.
There's so many. I think I'll just say one because it's kind of universal, which is that when NASRIN was released temporarily on a health leave to have some medical treatment, the first time we spoke to her, she'd been in prison for years. She was still had that big smile, that big heart. She asked about us. She asked about our kids. And that kind of heart, that kind of caring about others, that's what we need in our lives personally, and that's what we need around the globe. And so we can follow NASRIN's example to really a better way to live.
Yeah. And what about you, Marcia?
No, I have to say it's the same. I mean, I think we had been asked this question in a different way. And I think for both of us, we were one day talking to her, on a WhatsApp or FaceTime in a park with Reza. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, she was gone. She was gone. And so when we saw her again, then, after, 3 years, it was so emotional. I mean, I was crying. It was just so incredibly emotional to see this person again, because also over that period of time, we've been editing and making the film and showing the film. And so she's such a big part of our lives. Every single day, we're doing something in some way around, her and her situation and everything. And so to actually see her again, it was very emotional.
Listen, we are at the end of our conversation. I really appreciated you giving this time for this interview. So thank you for being with us. Let's get in touch, because I would like, David told me that it might be possible to interview her husband, Reza. I would love to do that. If
we will ask.
We'll ask.
And send us your address and we'll send you a free NASRIN t-shirt. It's very attractive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
What a great pleasure.
Jeff Kaufman and Marcia Ross for this interview. And thank you for watching my Harlem Portraits. See you next Saturday. Bye-bye.